I'm glad to welcome you to our PMC Explore session today. My name is Orest. I'll be hosting today's meetup, and today we have our guest, Diogo Rendeiro, who is a product manager with more than 10 years of experience in product management, many of which working with data and interesting data visualization projects. So now I'll just pass the words to Diogo to present himself and to start our conversation.
Thanks, Orest. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here and talk to you today about product innovation. I'm gonna start sharing the slides. Yep.
And while you're sharing, I would just set a small agenda for us today. So at first, Diogo will present himself, and there is going to be a first so-called a theoretical part of the innovation, product innovation, and then we will have time for some questions and answers. So if you have any questions, you can post them to chat or to the Q&A bot here in Zoom, which one is more comfortable for you. We can decide them, we can discuss them in this small break we will have. And after the Q&A, we will continue to the case study, and then we will have another Q&A. Thanks.
So I've been doing product for some time, as Orest mentioned. Started in product in Germany at Zalando, and I've been working now in the past few years in B2B companies in different types of product contexts. And one thing that always fascinated me was how product experiences can be magical, and how it is so intangible. How do you capture that magic, and how do you capture innovative technologies to do that, to be able to do that? So this talk is a bit about that. Is a bit about the challenges that are in setting up an innovation thread that is disruptive, and it's also a bit about some lessons, some things I've learned, and some things more specific to the case study that I'll present in the second half, where I can also share learnings there and have a discussion about what 10x innovation can look like. So let's get started. One thing that is often misunderstood and the subject of much debate and much conversation is what we do about these emerging technologies. What power do they actually have, and how much of it is just hype or just buzzwords? So a very good example for this is the whole space of artificial intelligence, and I've worked with AI products before, and the whole space and all that is written about it. There's a lot of confusion. So, and these headlines that I have here as an example are even before the whole GPT-3 boom of recent. That really got a lot of people talking about that as well, and speculating about the pace of AI innovation. And the tricky thing here is that by definition, emergent technologies are not well understood, right? So they are a good topic for speculation and for this type of confusion. And then people are discussing, are robots going to take over my job? What is going to still be done by humans, and that type of things. And while at the same time, we find that when some startups are audited and there's some due diligence done, a lot of these new products or new startups that call themselves AI powered are actually not using real AI at all. So this is a very interesting subject, and it is powered by these emerging technologies. But in the end, the way you see the value of emerging technologies and what really makes them valuable is not the technology by itself, is the application, is about how these new tools help us design experiences that feel magical, design experiences that to the user are an order of magnitude better than whatever was there before. If you think about how it used to be before we had Uber and this type of applications, if you actually had to hail cabs, if you wanted to have a car to take you to the airport at 5 a.m., you actually had to call the taxi service beforehand, or you needed to know where you could walk to, where there would be cabs at that time. So the delta in the experience is really transformational, and that's what's so exciting about what these technologies can bring, is how they just transform expectations, because now you would never go back. After having a mobile phone, people don't really go back to using landlines. Maybe my grandma does, but most people don't, right? So it's really a new level of experience. It's a different type of experience that you have, and it really gives you a wow moment, and then you're stuck in that. Then you don't want to get away. So this is really aspirational for product managers. How can we be building this type of technologies? Let's take a step back, however, and take a bit of stock of where product management is nowadays. Most of the time, we're not building all those innovative technologies. Most of the time, we're actually building incremental improvements on our product. Um, and um, and often this takes the shape of a quarterly cycle of planning, um, and some product management role or similar that coordinates priorities, and then an engineering team working on those priorities to develop capabilities on the product that hopefully will have some resonance with the end users and the outcomes they're trying to achieve. For the organizations where the process is more mature, not only is this factory and really working at the regular cadence, you might also have some instrumentation and some quality in the metrics that you're able to generate, so that you can assess if these increments in capability are actually translating as well as increments in value delivered uh, to the end users, and if we're really targeting the outcomes they're trying to achieve. Nevertheless, um, this is the best case scenario in most situations of most tech companies working today with where they focus their core on product development. So a lot of it is essentially incremental, and that doesn't need to be a bad thing, but it is limited when we seek to tackle emerging technologies. How did we get here? How did we get to this incremental risk mitigation thinking mode and working mode of iterating on the product and seeking validation for every increment that we deliver every quarter? Well, essentially, if you put together the timeline of when the lightweight methodologies for software development that we group together as agile, and in particularly Scrum, really took more traction and popularity, it happens essentially at the same time as the dot-com crash. So you had a bunch of tech startups that were trying to tame the new emerging technology that was the internet, and trying to figure out how to be able to deliver value, how to be able to monetize uh, their ideas that were powered by the internet. And you had a bunch of e-commerce plays that were not that robust, but it was a new medium, and people didn't really understand fully how end users would interact. So that essentially led to the crash. And after that, we see this trend towards incremental, validated steps in software development that we can associate with the agile methodologies. And as I said, incremental steps are in a way a bit at odds with how to leverage emerging technology. I really like this metaphor. This picture is the first steamship that crossed the Atlantic. And what you see about it that is immediately interesting is that there is an actual steam engine inside that ship, but there are also sails. So this is the type of approach where you kind of want to try this steam engine technology. It seems like really powerful, but this is how you've built boats before, right? This is how we've dealt with this before. It's with sails, and that's what you figure out is safe. So you almost have this transitional flux of going before the technology appears, then you have a hybrid model where you put that technology inside whatever you've been doing before, and only after that transitional period, or by taking quite a risk, would you move into a solution that is powered primarily by that emerging technology. So should we not do agile? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that most people are primarily doing incremental improvements using some agile methods in a more or less systematized way, to the point that it is kind of a factory of producing features. But if we want to do disruptive innovation, we can use agile methods, but we need to go a bit beyond that. And we need to really understand the difference between sustaining innovation and disruptive innovation. It's completely fine to focus on improving a product at a 10% cadence. Every quarter deliver 10% more, 10% faster, 10% better. This is fine. This keeps customers happy. And this is how you compete and you stay relevant in the market that you're in. Disruptive innovation is different. It's about tackling the unknown, going into a space that you're not as comfortable, figuring out market needs that have not been addressed, exploring niche markets. So it has a much higher likelihood of failure, but it also has a much higher payoff once you get it right. You might be able to create a whole new market and to be the leading offering in that market. To illustrate this, let me tell you a story about the camera market. This picture is of an engineer holding one of the first models, one of the first prototypes of a digital camera. And the picture is from 75. I'll get back to that. Back at that, in the 70s, film cameras were the major predominant technology for photos. And they were really selling. They were selling millions of cameras a year. And the major company that was behind most of this was Kodak. Kodak was at the pinnacle of innovation at the time, where engineers wanted to work at. The pictures of the Apollo 11 mission were actually taken with Kodak cameras. So they were doing really well, and they had tremendous growth, as you see in that curve, in those 20 years. But then something happened, right? Digital cameras happened, and it really outpaced the previous market. It's at a different level. You need to change the axis to actually plot the two lines together, right? And Kodak essentially went out of business. And if you see, it took only more than 5 years, but about 5-7 years for that to happen, for something that was emerging to completely take over, and for the film market to eventually be just a curiosity. The interesting part is that that guy worked at Kodak, and they actually built one of the first prototypes for a digital camera. The problem was they didn't have the structure, they didn't have the setting in the organization to be able to pursue this research um, thread in parallel with what they were with their sustaining innovation. They were too afraid that the digital play would capture and cannibalize the revenue they had in the film market. So they just stopped that. They didn't invest in that. And eventually somebody else did, and they disrupted Kodak's positioning and created a whole new market. They could have been the ones to transition between the two markets if they had the ability to invest in both threads and to figure out what was the ideal time to make that transition and to understand how they could be the ones that were leading that change instead of being caught off guard. And of course, the good thing is this there's always new opportunities, right? Digital cameras are also now not as popular anymore, but everybody has a cell phone, a smartphone, and cares about how many pixels that camera has. And we're trading smartphones every other year. So there is always the potential for disruption, and it's all about figuring out how can you sustain uh, your continuous innovation thread, uh, but at the same time be able to place disruptive bets and be able to follow them with funding and with organizational buy-in to make sure that you actually capture the value that might arise from that. And with that, I've covered my initial presentation. We can stop a bit for discussion and questions.
So I actually have one question myself. So when coming up with an innovative idea that you call a 10x idea, so how do you know it's a digital camera type of thing versus being something that will not change the course of actions, like something that will not shoot? How do you define it?
I would say to think about how much does it really change the way that customers interact with it. So of course you can correlate the 10x concept with KPIs and think about, oh, this makes it 10 times faster to do something. But it's more about the perception for the user than the actual KPI. The KPI is kind of a proxy for that. Uh, from a business perspective, you hope that you get 10x revenue, but maybe it's just an auxiliary market that you're creating or something. Um, essentially, I would try to find ways to measure how does it impact the users. So if it really is something that they get so attached that it's hard to let go, then it's a good sign that it has that potential for disruption.
And I'm guessing like the problem here is that you still have the business stakeholders or the business owners that you have to pursue and sell your like dream or your idea to them.
Yep.
So what are the challenges you usually meet in such situations?
I would say that you need to carve out the space for experimentation. Um, and it might not be as structured, it might be a bit more messy than the agile factory, right? You might have a bit more structure in how you work when you're doing the quarterly planning, and then you get some goals that you have to work on, and then you figure out some initiatives that are supposed to move those KPIs and so on, and you have allocated teams for that. And maybe you need to figure out where can I have some bets where I can show some initial validation or traction for these more crazy out there ideas. And then once those things start to gain traction, you need to find out ways. It depends. You might have an organization where that is set up, where you have a research side of the organization that just focuses on that, or as a product manager, you might just also use your leverage to pitch these ideas, or even to try them beforehand with some small prototypes in some way. But what I think the lesson from Kodak is that you need to be able to articulate very clearly wow, and to be able to test for that, and it's hard. When is the right timing to go to market? And accept that it might not be the right timing now, but that doesn't mean we should shut down the idea, because that's essentially what they did with digital, and it costed them dearly.
Okay, thanks. And so there are so there is like the business side. So you need to get the resources, you need to sell the idea and so on. And usually this is about like selling, let's say, upwards. So you have to pitch the idea to get the budgets, to get an approval and stuff like that. But usually, so when you have a great idea, which is totally different, it would be coming from you personally or some small group from the organization, but you will need more resources to actually even test it. So how do you work with the teams that you need to even test the idea? How do you inspire them? How do you like send that spark you get to them?
So one trick, and as I said, agile is part of this. One trick is to start small, right? Try to figure out something that you could do in the course of your typical sustained innovation motion, of your typical agile development, that allows you to test some element of it, some very small part that you can show, see there's traction there. To give you an example, when we launched, and this is actually a failed example, but still, when we launched next day delivery and express delivery at Zalando, it became clear to me that there was the potential for a scheduled day. So it's something that's popular in the UK, but that you don't see much outside the UK, apparently, at least in Europe. And it's the ability to say, it doesn't matter if I get it right away. I just want to know the day where it arrives. I will pay more just to, it's on Wednesday and it's 3 days from now.
I definitely will.
I was also biased in that sense that I also wanted this a lot. And what we managed to do was we were going to do a survey anyway for the new customers using Express. And so we included questions that were about how much do you care about the speed of the delivery, but we also included then questions about the certainty of the delivery. So I was able to convince people that it made sense to ask those questions, and we changed the survey that we were sending out. So we're just leveraging existing resources to try to test an hypothesis, right? And very early, not building anything. Yeah, and we got validation for this idea. It ended up not being prioritized because we had a whole series of topics on the fast delivery subject that we had more evidence that were important. But it was like it had a shot and it became a thing. Do we want to prioritize this or not? And do we want staff teams to try to experiment with this or not? And it only became a thing because we put that question there. So there are small steps that you can do to try to get some validation that might help you persuade the business guys, the business owners, or the whoever is behind the allocation to do things. Ideally, at a certain size, what you want is to have a research division to explore those things, so that it's just like, okay, we're just spending money to make sure that nobody disrupts us. We disrupt ourselves. But of course, this is aspirational.
Okay, thanks. That's an interesting answer. Okay, and I think the last question before we move to the next section is coming from the audience. So the question is, usually budget owners are skeptical and don't like changes. What helps you to pursue others to do innovation? So I guess it's how do you overcome the resistance to change?
So the question presupposes that you need to convince certain people to innovate, and to give up budget for that. So essentially, if you're looking at it in terms of, there is this business unit that has a certain budget, and there is this product team that could contribute to that business unit, it might be harder than if you look at it in terms of, can we have uh, budget within products or in a research area? So how can we set up kind of like experimentation budget, so that you can first prove things in order to then ask um, for that additional investment. Um, so essentially, what I'm saying is some upfront product discovery, showing the opportunity, and generating some excitement with those stakeholders, is the key to then possibly unlocking more funds for that. But it always depends on the organizational structure. It depends on the goals, on how can you align those things with the company goals. Larger organizations might foster environments where experimentation is encouraged, and where you might have um, you know the ability to pitch for certain projects, or the ability to do hackathons or things like that. So look for these avenues to prove that there might be something there, that might be a market, or that there might be a potential for a different experience, before asking for capital to invest. It's kind of what's the word for this? It's kind of a chicken and egg problem, but it's kind of like, start as small as you can to prove a bit of value, and iterate on that until you can get to a bigger ask. That's essentially my recommendation.
Thank you. Okay, so let's now see the case study.
Yeah, so I think this is a good one, because it also covers some of this. Wait, wrong. What's wrong? Okay. Are you seeing my screen, Feedside Genome?
Yes.
Okay, because it was showing me something on this side. So I think this is an interesting case study, because it actually covers some of the questions as well, I think, and helps illustrate this type of getting buy-in incrementally, in order to get more and more resources to continue exploring an idea. It's about a product called Genome. This was built at Feedzai, a company I was at previously. And to give you a bit of context, it's about catching fraud, complex patterns of fraud in payments. So just for context, this is what that company does. They're doing fraud detection. They also use AI for fraud detection. They were one of the first to implement that capability. And it's a huge space. There's a lot of fraud in payments, both with cards as well as with other payment methods. And the banks are very interested, as well as payment service providers and merchants and other actors in the financial system. They're all quite interested in ensuring that the losses to fraud are minimized, and that essentially the payment ecosystem is as safe as possible, and people feel safe using it, whether it's an online transaction or whether you're using your credit card to purchase dinner at a restaurant. So what's interesting about this space is that although it has already been disrupted by artificial intelligence to some extent, you still need humans in the loop to do some validation and to investigate if amongst series of transactions, which ones are the ones that raise alarm, that raise suspicion. And you need the humans in the loop in order to make sure that the artificial intelligence models are actually kept up to date. and that you're able to catch new types of fraud that simply emerge, because the fraudsters never stop to think about new ways to try to get money, or to fool people, and to compromise cards or accounts, and whatnot. So the AI helps deal with this at scale, at a lower cost, but you still need experts to investigate. And to this day, most of the tools out there are not much more than what I'm showing in the screen. This is a oversimplification, but what the analysts use is essentially looking at series of transactions to figure out which one is the odd one out, which one doesn't make sense for this customer or for this card. And this is time consuming and error prone. And yeah, it's a bit like using Excel to fight fraud. So we had this idea of applying some different methods for this and trying to go for some visual approach instead of tables, trying to maybe use something around graph technology or some other visualization techniques. And this was something that was a few product managers thinking about it. There was buy-in from the head of product. So we just got together and set up some sessions on this topic. And we started interviewing internal experts and people who worked at clients, and debriefing like what are the typical fraud patterns that we see about data breaches, about malware, about account takeovers, bunch of different things that might happen, where a visualization of all the entities that are related in those transactions would be helpful. So initially, it's just kind of a brainstorming sessions. We also reviewed a bit of what's out there in the market, and there wasn't much, or in other words, there was a lot, but not much of it was good, and was a bit confusing. But we had some ideas of how others were applying this type of visualization. And then the next step we took as we were making the case for this was, let's get a cross-functional team to just work on this for a few days. So we got a data visualization expert. We got the guy that had the most knowledge about fraud analysts, that was a fraud analyst himself in the company. We also got a data scientist involved. And together with the PMs, we just booked a few mornings to work on this. So what you see there are actually pictures of a whiteboard that was serving a double duty also as a table. So we were having coffee and drawing and just brainstorming about what could it look like and how would these patterns be visualized, and how would that be useful for end users. And then the data visualization expert was really a champion of the idea as well. So she made some mock-ups even of what it might look like. And we were all excited about these mock-ups, and we started doing hallway testing. We started just like, okay, let's try to see lunchtime, coffee breaks. Let's try to see how people react to this. And we would just show this to random colleagues to get their feedback and to see how would they interpret this. So kind of like doing hallway testing, almost guerrilla usability testing on the mockups. And then we didn't have funding for this, so there was no immediate outcomes. But we saw an opportunity. We were organizing the first hackathon in the company that was going to be open to the whole engineering team, and where people had 2 days to just fool around with whatever crazy ideas they had. And we thought, okay, this is a great opportunity to get into this environment, get some engineers to also help out and try to show the value of this and try to get more buy-in for the idea. And there were two critical success factors here, two elements that really made this successful. One was that risk-free environment of the hackathon, and the fact that there were also important people there organizationally, and that we could get access to an internal data set from a client that was anonymized, and that people in the company knew this data set. So they knew some of the patterns that were there. It was something that was used, I believe, in training for data scientists. So it was something that would be familiar if we were able to showcase known patterns in that data set. And that's exactly what happened. So this is a visualization from the outcome of those 2 days of hacking away. We even played with the 3D. It doesn't add much, but it's fun. And it helped sell it actually. And in the end, that project won the hackathon. It was the best project of the hackathon, and it got attention from the top management. So you see there as well two of the co-founders of the company, and they're smiling. So that's a good thing. So what happened next is that we actually pitched for incubating this product and continue to iterate on it. And we figured out that we had an important learning from the hackathon, which was using real data was key to be able to understand the value of this type of product, because you need to understand what are the real patterns of fraud that are there. You need to have data that that people can identify with, that they've seen before. So we figured out a few customers that we had a good relationship with and that we could trial this with them. And we went to build a prototype. This took a few months, but eventually we were able to get to the customer and show them essentially what I'm showing here in this GIF. With their data, exploring what is connected in terms of entities in the transactions. So you have cards, you have users, you have accounts there, and then people start saying, oh, this is weird. These guys should not be connected to those guys. These are too many people on the same card or too many cards on the same device. And it was really insightful because we believe that this would accelerate users, the time that users took to make decisions. And we found out that it depended on the user's seniority and knowledge about fraud detection in general. So the more seasoned fraud investigators were super excited with this, and they were very autonomous in playing with a half-functioning prototype and then copy-pasting references between that and the actual system. They worked around all the limitations, and they were able to use that to fulfill their job. So they actually asked us, can you keep this prototype live? Can you just keep it running? We know that the data is not being refreshed all this often. We know that it has these limitations. It will just be these 2-3 people using it. They asked us that on the spot on the day they tried it. So that was really good validation, but also it helped us steer the product, because when we showed it to less experienced analysts that were very used to the script that they were following, it was confusing to them. They were afraid they would do something wrong. They were afraid they would waste time. So this initial validation was really important for us to understand where the tool was strong, what the tool was strongest at, and what was the ideal persona to have in mind. And as we move forward, we realized that whenever we had periods where we were not getting that feedback from customers, and in B2B sometimes it's trickier to get customers to interact with you and to respond to this type of queries. When we didn't have that feedback loop, we were less sure of the direction we were following. And on the other hand, we also had a separate concern, which was if we were over specializing the solution for a single customer. So we wanted to have more customers involved, and we wanted to have a cadence of going to customers with some things to show and with an idea of what are we testing, what are we prototyping, what are we evolving, so that we didn't go into exploring too much paths that we were not actually testing at the same cadence. So we adopted the design sprint methodology. We custom tailored it to what felt right for the product and the team. And we were able to actually continue this customer development program and to iterate with customers on the ideal visualization for specific contexts. So we iterated a few times. Sometimes we simply failed. Sometimes we learned a bit more and we didn't fail as much. And eventually we got to an experience that made sense and that was valued by the users. So was this successful? I believe so. Is it a 10x product? I believe it is because it completely changes for a specific persona. It completely changes the job. It completely changes their experience. Instead of going through lists, they're visualizing things. They can play with those filters and see how things expand and collapse, and how they evolve over time, how the network grows over time, and they can pinpoint what were points of compromise in the network and other things. So these are things that they would spend much more time with their on the side, copy pasting things to Excel, trying to figure out. So for these seasoned investigators, it is a 10x product. For other analysts, at best, it might achieve this halving the time of both decisions, but it might not be suited for some of them. But fundamentally, it does solve a product better than previous solutions did for a specific consumer, for a specific persona. Yeah, and furthermore, it is able to help with closing deals, because when you show this type of animations with known data about public data breaches of credit cards, it gets really, you can really see the excitement also on the business users' faces, because the concepts are much more readily grasped than when showcasing other elements of the product suite. So there was also that factor that was important and that we only understood along the way. We had no idea that it would have that that impact in the sales process as a closer argument as well. We continued to do R&D on this, so it kind of was a project that also helped set up the organization to have this continued thread on graphs and to do research on that. So there's a series of threads ongoing still that emerged from this product. So that's another property of taking these types of bets, is that when they're successful, they sometimes open the problem space to be explored by other sub-threads that are connected. So that's also quite interesting. Yeah. And that's the story of a 10x product.
Thank you. That was an interesting case study. Now, before we move to the questions to this section, I would like to launch a quick poll for all participants, which is just to understand how well are we doing on this session, just so that we knew if we are improving and so that we could improve in the future. So I'm launching a quick poll. It has just one question. So basically rating this session from 1 to 10, where 10 is great and 1 is not so great. So everyone, please just go in and make your votes. Thanks. I see we started voting. So 11 people voted. Let's go for 12, maybe 13. Who goes for 13? Okay, so just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we end the poll. Thanks everyone who has voted. So now let's go for the questions. There is one question from Marta. It's how do you overcome the blocker with low feedback on the product from certain groups?
Keep asking. So essentially, there were people that had no opinions on the early mockups. There were customers that it didn't resonate with them. So it's always about insisting on it, but keeping asking to other people. Just try to get feedback from wherever you find possible. And another thing is, at some point, we would just figure out existing processes, existing engagements with that were potential feedback points to inject a preview of the product. So we didn't immediately go to a customer and show them a prototype that we've been working for 2 months and they have no idea what this is. We first, like in some engagements, show, oh, by the way, we're exploring graph research or graph visualizations. And sometimes showing less and just doing those almost teaser previews of these topics that are ongoing is the best way to get customers to go on, oh, I want to know more about that. Try to kind of like get them in that mode, because then you're essentially what you're getting is more time. You're always buying more time. You never get buy-in all at once. You showcase a bit, you get more time to show more. You show more, if it's interesting, you get more time or more access to other people to show more. So that was usually the strategy.
Thanks. And the question I have is, you were showing, so there was a slide where you were showing that you were like improving a data visualization, like the approaches you took, and you said you learned and failed. So how do you measure if such a data visualization gets better or does not get better? So which metrics did you look for?
In that case, we were simply looking to see how many people interviewed understood it. So we had some specific things that we wanted to understand if they understood. And we worked with user research to set up the right questions to ask and the right way to set up those interviews. And then we interviewed 3-4 people, and the one of those where it was like failed in red was because like nobody got it. Nobody understood what we thought that we were conveying with that visualization. In the next one, where we changed the colors a bit, because we were trying to convey multiple things, right? We were trying to convey these items have been previously in fraudulent transactions, at the same time that we're showing how they're related in the current transactions that are being analyzed. And just that distinction, making that clear, we realized it can only actually be done at the last iteration when you have more detailed information. So it's like in the visualization, you get a glimpse, and then in the detailed information, you understand what happened history-wise. But we were trying to see if these things were perceived by people. And in the second, it was orange because like some people got it, some didn't. So it was always like have a very clear thing that you're going to measure. In this case, it was simply how many people get it, how many people get this thing in particular, and these distinctions, these conceptual distinctions in particular, from the way that it is being represented visually. And then we interviewed always, I think, 3 to 5 people on every engagement to be sure that it was not too biased by just a single opinion. And the other key thing that is kind of implicit in that is keep it simple. Keep the test unit quite simple. Otherwise, if you're trying to show too much or test too much, it's going to get lost. It's also valuable feedback, but it's a different type of feedback.
Thanks. And a similar one or around the same thing question I have is, so at first when you showed this spreadsheet where there is just a lot of data, I was like, how the hell does anyone analyze this? How can you find a fraud here? And then I'm guessing you had some mind process going on in there and you had some ideas that we can improve it. So you had some early ideas. How do you pass those ideas from your head to a designer who actually can build a prototype or designing thing?
So I think the best thing to achieve common understanding is to actually go to the clients and watch them use the product. I recall a very humbling experience at a customer in the United States that I visited with the designer at the time, and we were all about the case manager, essentially the application that I'm representing with the Excel list, where you can see everything that is being triggered, all transactions that are being alerted, and you can see related lists of transactions. And we're all like, oh, are we going to add this feature or that feature? What do they need to do? Like, we were so much into our product is so great. And then first thing the analysts do in the morning, download everything to Excel. Just export to Excel. And now I'm working on Excel and I'm painting this green and purple and yellow. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, we're building this product. And like, it was frustrating, but you need to engage and you need to understand what is going on. And then you start seeing, oh, it's because of this feature and it's because of this little thing. They cannot actually sort this in the way that they can on Excel. They cannot have a tracker of how much things they have worked through, and they want to keep track of themselves because they're tracked against aggressive metrics, and they want to argue with their boss when the boss is going to tell them that you've only reviewed X alerts this week. But those were hard alerts. How do you know? You have the Excel. So, and honestly, this type of learnings were, it's not something that you would get from stakeholders. You needed to get them from the users. We didn't know that it was a problem, so we didn't have telemetry on the download, the export button. So we couldn't figure it out without actually seeing them using it. And the problem was completely, I'm giving this example because it made the problem completely obvious between me and the designer. We were completely aligned because we experienced the same thing. And then when we came back to pitch to engineering what the problem was, our views were completely in sync. So yeah, user feedback is extremely important, and having that shared with the designers is great. If it's something completely new, if it's like something, then it's a little trickier, and it will need more brainstorming with the designer, I suppose, to go back and forth to ensure that we are talking the same language and understanding each other. But I think even if you have ideas in your head as a product manager about what the experience might be or what how you can evolve the product, if you and the designer are together watching the user do something with the product, that's the perfect follow-up to then discuss those ideas, because you have a basis of understanding of what's working and what's not.
Yeah, observation is a great approach. And I think like Excel is a missing feature of pretty much any enterprise software. So you cannot just totally kill it or something. So it always will be there.
It's always there.
Yeah, it's always there. And I guess it's like you can just use the observation by how people expand your software with the Excel as just an inspiration for all the next features you're missing in a platform.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I learned, for example, is the way they, when they were working on that tabular data, they had certain patterns of interaction that if you would ask them to walk you through it, maybe they were not even conscious themselves, but when you watch it for 10 minutes, alert after alert, how they work, you see that they're always scrolling up and down. And I realize, oh, they're just doing count distinct on this column. Maybe I can give them count distinct at the top of the column, because that's what they're doing. Or they're scrolling left and right to find the right column they need. Oh, the ordering of the columns is not the prioritized ordering of the user, so we should fix this. So there are small things like that just observation really helps.
Yeah. I can remember one case from my example when we were like extending the feature in 2 different platforms as a request from the users. So we went through all the discussion sessions, interviews, and stuff like that, and something was not working out, so it didn't feel right, the thing we were doing. And then I just asked my stakeholder to show me what they are doing. And I just sat with them, and in 10 minutes, I understood we are doing a completely wrong thing. Like if we implemented everything we agreed on, it would not help the stakeholder. So instead, we just fully automated a task they did, and they did not need an Excel at the end of the day. And they were originally looking for a feature that would just add data to their Excel so that they could make some manipulations.
Yeah. And sometimes you just need to observe how it happens, where it happens, right? Because, for example, at Zalando, I worked in logistics software, and we had this crazy idea that, okay, they're always using these hand scanners to scan barcodes all the time in the warehouse. That's part of the job. What if we create an interface where they don't have to click anything? They can just scan barcodes. Already, a lot of interfaces supported that, but the barcodes were just in a printed out in a plastic cover for them to scan, and they mapped to some actions. And we're like, no, we're going to do so much better. We're going to put these plastic barcodes next to the screen, and we're going to have buttons that map to those barcodes directly, so it's very visual and very direct. Yeah, but then we went with this prototype to the warehouse, and we realized they had to hold the scanner. And this raised 2 problems. Those scanners can hurt the eyes of the person on the other side of the aisle. So you cannot really do scanning like that in that space. And it starts hurting your wrist if you're always holding that to do a click. It's much better to have your wrist on the table, be it with the mouse or with the scanner and some barcodes on the table. So great ideas. Fail
sometimes die
reality.
in the real world.
Reality is harsh.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so it was really nice talking to you today. Hope we will see you sometime in the future again. And thanks everyone for joining. Have a nice day today. Thanks again, Diogo, and wish you all best.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye, everyone.